Okay. So we're just going to wait as a group for people to arrive. You know, when you see the food van come into the car park, and you're thinking, I should have really had some breakfast.
Intermittent fasting.
I think we can hear the food van as well.
Oh, can you? Sorry. Yeah, that was
the typical jingle of a food van.
Yeah. Hi, everybody that have just joined us. Just going to wait a minute or two for others to jump into the session before we start, if that's okay. Okay, I think we should start, if that's okay with everybody. My name's Steve Haskew. I am the Director of Sustainability at Circular Computing. I have a discussion today online with guests from the WWF, Dom and Lauren, and Inga from the Royal Mint. The session today will take about 40 minutes or so. There'll be Q&A at the end. What I would say is with the Climate Conference COP27 on this week and next, the session's quite well timed. We'll be discussing integrating sustainable IT procurement with these organisations. We'll be posting a few polls during the session to gauge your own position on your own sustainability journey. So when a new poll is released, you'll see a little red notification in the right-hand column of the chat. Of course, you can send your own text questions to the guests at any time during the session, and we'll try and answer those at the end if we haven't done already in the conversation. The webinar is being recorded. We'll send out the recording to everybody that's registered and for those people on the call as well. If they want to socialise it internally or externally, then that's pretty okay with me and the guests here today as well. So I'm delighted to welcome Inga, Dom and Lauren. And so what I would like to do is just to ask each of you, starting with Lauren, if that's okay, what your role is, what your ambitions of the organisation are, and where you are on your journey with sustainability.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lauren, the Environmental Manager here at WWF-UK. So my role is to make sure that WWF is walking the talk and practicing what we're preaching. So we're very good at going around the world and telling people to stop deforestation, divest from fossil fuels, cut carbon footprints, all these kinds of things, and raise global awareness. But then it would be very hypocritical if we weren't doing those things ourselves. So my job is to monitor our carbon footprints, make sure that we're accounting for all the things we should be, reducing those environmental impacts, helping to be more sustainable as an organization as well. Essentially, I'm like the eco-police a little bit. So people will often see me around the office rummaging in the bins, telling people off, looking at printing, all those kinds of nitty-gritty things that help us achieve our mission. Yeah, and ambitions for the organization, I think, in terms of sustainability, we want to we have some informal science-based targets to halve our biggest sources of emissions by 2030. Those are in line with a 1.5 degree target. We also want to just generally be as sustainable as possible and help target some of the other areas of sustainability, not just environmental, but social and economic too, to make sure that we are a well-rounded organization, not just getting the environmental sorted, but everything else that we can as well.
That's great, thanks, Lauren. And from the Royal Mint's lens, Inga, how are you getting on over there?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me today. So I joined the Royal Mint in August last year as Head of Sustainability, and this was a new role for the business at the time. So I'm responsible for leading the delivery of an ambitious sustainability program, integrating key environment, social and governance topics into the wider business strategy. So as Lauren touched on, we also are focusing on some key strategic drivers like decarbonisation and our net zero plans, but we're also looking across that social and governance lens as well. So myself and my team, we work to guide, inspire, but I would say also challenge different business units, departments, and individuals within the Royal Mint, ultimately supporting our vision to be leaders in sustainable precious metals.
Brilliant, thank you. And yourself, Dom, in terms of your position within the business, and maybe you want to introduce yourself and what is it you do there?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Steve. So I'm Dominic, Elton, Head of IT Services at WWF-UK. So primarily involved in operating the business with effective, secure IT systems and services. That's what me and my team do. And Lauren keeps us honest when we come to procurement and IT. More of which I'm sure we're going to talk about today.
Thank you. I think I'm interested really to understand what the drivers for you were when you were looking at sustainable IT procurement. What were the key things that made you think differently?
Is that for me or Dom?
Let's go with yourself, Lauren.
Well, I can start and then Dom can finish off.
That would be great.
So for us, IT is a big source of emissions. So we know that our previous laptops had a rough carbon footprint of about 500 kilos per unit. So if you've got 500 times 500, then that's quite a significant carbon footprint. Should have done the maths before I started trying to do that in my head. So already you've got a significant carbon footprint, but it's not just about the carbon footprint of a unit. It's all the precious minerals that go into mining, all the different things that you need to put, the components that you need for a laptop. There's also waste, so growing levels of waste electricals being generated around the planet. They have not just harmful emissions at when they're being mined, but also when they're being processed at the end of life. If they go to landfill, they leach chemicals into the water, into the air, all these kinds of dangerous impacts. And there's also a very high risk of modern slavery associated with electricals and laptops and things as well. I think it's the #1 high risk area for modern slavery on the Global Slavery Index. So there's a lot of hazardous risks that come with IT. Even though it's great and it helps us do our job, we want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to reduce the impact. We still need it to function as an organization, but how can we make that impact a lot lower? So every contractual period, we change over our laptops. Sometimes that's 3 or 5 years, depending on what's been agreed. So it was really important for us this time around to think, how can we do better? But also, how can we achieve a solution that balances social and environmental with IT? Like, it's no good buying a really environmentally friendly product if it doesn't work and it's not going to see you through. So that's where it was fantastic to have Dom and his team on board to give that perspective of, is this actually going to work or is it not? Yeah.
And in that regard, then, I'm thinking that if you think about, I don't know, linearity and the way things have been in the past, having a broader stakeholder environment, Dom, in terms of the actual procurement, did you have to satisfy more than you did previously to achieve what you got?
So, I mean, we go through a similar process for any kind of high spend internally, and so involving stakeholders from finance and legal and procurement and the environmental twist with Lauren, and ourselves within IT, and it's that kind of combined approach as we would take for anything really, that we would look at at the options that we have and decide a kind of balance, what's the best balance for us as an organisation going forward. I think I was pleased when I joined WWF. Everyone at who works at WWF is kind of passionate about what we're doing, right? And we recognise, the challenges that we have in front of us, not only as an organisation but as individuals. How are we actually going to bend the curve? How are we going to stop us heading into kind of climate disaster? And so when I joined, it was 3.5 years ago. So we'd already, the previous laptop already happened. But what was pleasing, we were already looking at kind of, EPEAT standards. So any technology purchase we made for hardware was already kind of gold standard. It would have to be gold standard. We would at least look at that. But what was refreshing, I guess, in this presented a new opportunity for us through circular computing and our friends at Tangible Benefit, who introduced circular computing, to be able to look at, actually, this is the first time a remanufactured laptop can actually stand up against some of its peers. And importantly, right, we're not using minerals, we're not using new minerals to create those laptops. It's a new kind of standard and approach to technology, I think, technology hardware, likes of which we hadn't seen before. So yeah, it's great. It's great to see the industry is kind of taking on that responsibility and creating these products that are actually, something that is viable for a business to look at.
That's good to hear. On the resource preservation theme, Inga, I know that the Royal Mint's 1100 years old. For those that don't know, it's been around and seen as an organisation considerable change. But just taking that as a theme, it has sustainability running through its veins, I would suggest. In terms of resource preservation, how does the Mint approach that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this year we embarked on a new 5-year plan for the business, and I can genuinely say that sustainability sits at the heart of that 5-year plan. And there are some key themes that we are looking at, and themes that we've already touched on today. So how can we move towards and support a more circular economy? We're developing science-based targets to support our net zero ambitions. How are we ensuring that everything that we procure is done in a responsible manner? And from a resource preservation point of view, if I bring it back to our IT systems, and what was the driver for change within the sustainable IT from that resource preservation point of view, anything that can demonstrate a more circular and less linear approach is going to be very appealing to us. And what we liked about the circular computing product was that sometimes it is difficult to understand how to integrate an organization's sustainability ambitions into the IT team. And we'd already started to transition our physical servers to more of a cloud-based system, but we hadn't looked at the rest of the physical state, including the laptops. And what I like about it is that we're able to, through a very small but material change, it provided an excellent opportunity to reinforce and create consistency in messaging to our staff. So when a new employee joins the Royal Mint on day one, they sit down for their day one new starter induction, and they get informed in the morning about the sustainability framework and the sustainability ambitions at the Royal Mint. And then in the afternoon, they are now handed their carbon neutral remanufactured laptop. So in the space of several hours, they've been a bit picking up on what Lauren said about walking the talk. They've been told the Royal Mint is committed to being a sustainable business. And in the afternoon, they're getting put into their hands tangible evidence of that. And that's obviously not the only thing we're doing, but it's a really effective way of reinforcing that message through the lens of sustainable IT.
There's a question actually I'd like to ask on that theme whilst we're on in the middle of that, is what metrics do you guys have to measure the ESG effects of IT equipment so that everybody's got a fair stab of doing the right thing for organisations like you. Is there a yardstick that you would use? Lauren.
So at WWF, we have, first of all, we have a supplier questionnaire. So that asks a business who's going to be supplying those products or services a variety of environmental, social, and economic questions so that we can find out, one, how committed are they really to sustainability? Like, what measures are they doing behind the scenes for their own organization? Because it might be that some companies are really great at selling a very eco product, but they haven't thought about sustainability anything themselves. So we use that questionnaire to generate some sort of scoring that we can use for comparing those suppliers. And then we'll look at the actual product or service that is being offered. Has it got accreditations, like Dom mentioned, EP gold rating? How circular is it? Have they got any sort of social accreditations, like maybe they're a living wage employer, those kinds of things as well. So the industry keeps changing, so each tender process is different, and we will look for more and more evidence. And really, we're looking for that externally verified evidence that proves that you're committed to what you say you're committed to. But sometimes with a small organization, that evidence might not be there, in which case we'll ask them more questions that can help us get a bigger picture about how that smaller business might be working just as hard to try and improve sustainability, but might not be able to afford those accreditations yet. But so it's sort of case by case and developing a basis to figure out what those parameters might be.
I think it's reassuring to hear that the WWF and most likely the Royal Mint, but I won't answer for Inga. You're broad-minded enough to give enough wiggle room that you recognise that the tenders that you make today might not necessarily represent the ones you're going to do tomorrow, because the subject matter of sustainability is deep and wide. We need to be open-minded to others out there that are coming to the table with solutions that provide a better, kind of more sustainable tomorrow. I think that's really reassuring. In terms of your work you're doing with science-based targets, Inga, maybe you could just quickly explain to the audience what you're doing there.
Sure. So about 12 months ago, I sat down with the executive team at the Royal Mint, and we essentially did a screening assessment of the net zero market. So what were the different approaches and certification or validation schemes we could align to, and which ones made the most sense for who we are as a business and the industry that we sit within. And on the basis of that, we decided to develop science-based targets for formal validation by the Science-Based Target Initiative, and also therefore aligning us with the UN Race to Zero scheme, the business ambition for 1.5. So like Lauren alluded to, for WWF, we are developing our science-based targets consistent with a 1.5 degree emissions reduction trajectory. And that has been around a 12-month journey. And we are just tantalizingly close to submitting our formal application to SBTi. So we've formally committed on their website, which triggered the 2-year process. But we're looking to this month submit our net zero targets. And then in parallel with that, we are developing our decarbonisation roadmap. So we have identified what our baseline emissions are, how much we need to reduce those by year on year, and we're now have a dedicated work stream with oversight by the executive team, identifying how we're going to deliver those emission reductions trajectory. So setting the targets is really only the first exciting aspect of the net zero challenge. The decarbonisation roadmap is when it really comes to life.
And at Circular Computing, we would say that a decarbonised future state doesn't exist without a circular economy. We're kind of shaking our head, and we're in agreement on that, I think.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, because one thing, when it came to I keep coming back to the IT infrastructure because I feel like I know this is a broader conversation, but it's our tangible proof point for this call. One thing I really like about the circular economy piece is that it sometimes elevates you beyond the carbon narrative. So I believe that climate change and addressing the challenges the world is facing are front and center of what we need to be considering as individuals and as organizations. But I also believe that there is sometimes a bigger narrative at play. And so we knew that buying the laptops from Circular Computing had a multitude of benefits. We know that because of the nature of how they're produced and because of the certifications that come with them, there will be an inherent lower carbon footprint associated with them. But we weren't too concerned about translating that into an actual number and the impact of that on the organization's baseline, because we knew ultimately that we were doing the right thing. So we were supporting a circular economy, we were purchasing products with an inherently lower carbon footprint, and that's what was really key for us. And that approach is being applied by us across other products and services that we're buying or leasing.
Okay. In terms of, if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to pick off questions that are appropriate to the conversation, if you don't mind. There was a question here that I've got for yourself, Dom, which was, did you encounter resistance from the end users when deploying circular computing product? And the reason I ask that is that there's a kind of a perception challenge that is often faced by the end users wanting new shiny kit. As a behavior, as individuals, we kind of like suckered into thinking that is what we have to have. Did you have any resistance from your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's more from my own team as opposed to our end user community. I think most people, like I say, most, if not all people who work at WWF are passionate about what we do and understand, these are the kind of decisions that we should be making as an organization, right? And so very supportive, actually, was, we had a lot of positive feedback when we announced we were going to be rolling out these laptops from across the organization. Obviously, being in IT and you're close to tech, you're quite, you want shiny and new, right? You want the new gadgets on the shelf, the things that are going to, still deliver great performance in 5, 6, 7 years, right? And I guess that was the main concern coming out of my team. But yeah, like I say, I think we had an opportunity to spend time with the laptop prior to rolling out and to do some testing ourselves. We were pleased it was an upgrade from our previous model, in line with the same family of models actually from HP. So, for, I would say 90% of the organization, it's more than adequate. It more than meets our needs for what we're doing. Most of our applications are online these days, and this is a very, like I say, very viable product at last.
In terms of other areas of IT then, Dom, are there other things? There was a question here about cloud being on-premises or being part of an off-premises environment. Do you have any working knowledge in that area?
So in terms of the infrastructure, cloud first. I mean, we're just going through a migration actually up to cloud after being in a hybrid working environment for the last 3 to 5 years, and a big driver of that is sustainability. Actually, we recognise that the big players like Microsoft can deliver performance across our infrastructure estate in a much more efficient way than we can. I mean, there's also a conversation around the building that we've got, which is quite iconic at WWF. It's built with a high degree of sustainability in mind. unfortunately not such a high degree of IT infrastructure delivery in mind, and so we've had some challenges in terms of keeping a stable temperature within the building.
Meaning what? It's hot and cold all the time, or it's not a constant?
Yeah, because of the approach that we took to sustainability in building that building, it's a little bit more challenging. I'd say to be able to guarantee a steady temperature, right, that your infrastructure equipment really demands.
I see.
Yeah, so we've had some internal pressures to be moving up to the cloud anyway. But I would say even if that wasn't the case, I would still say moving to the cloud is definitely a positive thing from a sustainability perspective. Like I say, just because of the vast size of cloud computing that those providers can offer, it means efficiency at scale ultimately. And Microsoft we're going to Azure. I'll be quite open about that, but Microsoft are leading the way in this. I think their executive teams are their bonus is linked to their sustainability outcomes. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking for organisations to take up. This is it's a serious approach to doing business. It's welcome for us at WWF.
Yeah, I bet. In terms of the pandemic and returning to work and the hybrid working environment, Lauren, I'm kind of sensing that the WWF had a very similar working practice pre-pandemic anyway. So the planning for IT wasn't all in the office or not. It was a bit of both anyway. I think you're on mute, actually, if you can hear. Maybe you could. Can you speak, Dom?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Just for the sake of the conversation, you might want to jump out and jump back in again, Lauren. Which is really cool. In reference to the Royal Mint, Inga, I would like to just have a bit of a conversation about the work you're doing with. We call it beyond economic repair. So there are certain things in the supply chain and the waste stream downstream that is beyond economic repair, or you just physically can't repair it, but has a value, like the precious metals. Maybe we could just have a pick away at what you're doing in that regard.
Of course. Sorry, I feel like I have myself on mute as well. Sorry to give you a heart attack there.
No.
So it is actually, it's a really exciting time at the Royal Mint at the moment. Some of you on the call may have heard or read that we have partnered with a Canadian startup, Haskew, to recover gold and ultimately other precious metals from electronic waste, and somewhat ironically, specifically from laptops and also mobile phones. So we are building a facility on site at the moment to scale up production processes so that we can have a fully commercial functioning facility on site next calendar year, recovering gold and other precious metals from this electronic waste. We don't purport to now be solving the world's e-waste problem. But what we are trying to do is to demonstrate essentially how we are making steps to move towards being more sustainable in the precious metals space, reducing our reliance on mined materials, and demonstrating how a circular economy can and should work, specifically through the lens of electronic waste. So that's a really exciting proposition within the business at the moment, and we're currently channeling the gold that we are recovering at the moment into a brand new jewelry line that we've launched, and again a really exciting transitional phase for the Royal Mint. So you've mentioned, Steve, our history and our legacy that we're extremely proud of, but we're also very much got our eyes on the future and what does the Royal Mint look like today and going forward, particularly through the lens of the different environment and social issues that we are facing as a society and as organisations. So it's a really exciting time.
And for people online, the Royal Mint is based in Wales.
It is, yes, here in sunny Lantricet, as you can see behind me. I apologise to any Welsh speakers for my terrible pronunciation, but yes, we are based in Wales, just north of Cardiff.
What's interesting about the Welsh government is that they are fairly heavily making commitments towards a circular nation at governmental level. And I want to kind of bring that in because, again, with the COP27 theme, collaboration here is key in creating a sustainable future. It's not down to the individual or the one organisation. It requires a chain of people to, like on the call here, to be believing in what we're all trying to achieve, and making decisions in our daily lives to get on that path. So the Welsh government are massively into the circular economy, into sustainability themes, and I believe there are within Wales there are I guess funding pockets from the government to make the circular economy become a central theme within government. Am I right in saying that?
So I guess we, as the Royal Mint, we are positioned in quite a unique space in that respect. So we actually wear three hats. So we are a limited company, so we're essentially a private company, and we therefore have to comply with all of the requirements of the Companies House Act. But we're also owned by His Majesty's Treasury, so we do have a link there with the UK government. But we're also based in Wales, as we touched on. So it's important that we demonstrate and provide leadership on what it is to be a sustainable business in the Welsh economy. And it's interesting because Wales were essentially the first, certainly within the UK, when they published their Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, to have a piece of legislation with the different elements of sustainability interwoven into it. And a key part of our sustainability framework is this industry collaboration and leadership piece. So recognizing that we can't do it on our own, and we will definitely do it better working with partners and suppliers and even competitors within the industry to promote and drive just greater improvements. I think I've been doing what I'm doing for maybe 7 or 8 years, I think, and I get a greater sense this year, coming out of the pandemic, and now we're going back into business as usual, that the landscape of, even if you are a competitor, everybody's trying to help everybody else, Lauren, in the sustainability journey, because some people are just beginning. And they can be forgiven for what they don't know. And some people are really advanced who are now retired, but they're coming back into work to help educate. With the WWF, do you have what I would call, I guess, HR well-being kind of workshops, sort of to educate and broaden people's knowledge internally as part of the daily work life?
On the Can you hear me? Just to check.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great. Wouldn't be an IT webinar without IT going wrong. So on the topic of climate change in particular, like for educating staff on that, or so we cover some elements of it, not as much as you might think, maybe for like an external organization, because sometimes it's sort of you don't want to over bombard people with the stuff that they're working on every day to make them take time out of their day when they're working on it to listen to it again, and sort of give them a bit of a break and focus on some other areas. So we do lots of focus on well-being and all sorts of different social issues and how we can improve as people and be more well-rounded people at work, on top of fighting against climate change.
In terms of social value, I'm guessing that's embedded into the two businesses.
Yes, it's a key. We've actually got two aspects to our approach to social value, I guess, to use that phrase. So we've actually got an external facing lens. So looking at how how we're engaging with the community, which is fairly typical for a lot of organizations, but how we're also engaging with them around specific themes. So entry-level talent, opportunities for employment, and quite reasonably unique to the Royal Mint, we've got a strong focus around promoting and supporting British craftsmanship. But then we also have an internal lens. So, and again, fairly familiar topics probably for most people on the call. We've got particular focus areas around health and well-being, diversity and inclusion, and also employee engagement.
Brilliant. Dom, in terms of going back into IT a second, were there barriers or questions that you had to overcome to move from linearity into a more of a sort of a circular solution? What were the two or three things that you had to be satisfied with before making a commitment?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it's more kind of performance, right? Is it going to stand up as a good enough model for our users to use ultimately going forwards, right, over the next 3 to 5 years? Are we going to be looking at doing this again, a refresh in a shorter time frame, and therefore is it actually it's becoming invaluable in that regard? But no, thankfully we'd spent time with the laptop. Actually, we had time prior to doing the rollout and making a decision. And to test that across the organisation, test users from different departments just to see, the outcome and would it really stand up. We felt confident it could. We knew well the model that we were looking at already, and it was, like I say, it was an upgrade within the same family. So we were, comfortable in the decision was going to be positive. But just to be sure and to overcome any hurdles, and like I say, most of those are from within my own team. So they had that, so there was going to be, a model that could be remanufactured that would provide both performance and longevity to us.
I think it's interesting that just for the broader audience, we have a rhythm in the business where every client, however big or small, goes through a very similar sort of exploratory journey. We tend to find that clients don't just jump in and kind of circular Steve says it's like this, so therefore it's like that. There's a process that involves the technology is a big part of the conversation, because if that doesn't do the job, then quite frankly we're out of business. But it's aligning to other stakeholders in the business where the IT team, let's say, previously never got thanked for doing their job. They just got kicked when the wheels of the bus fell off, if you like. And this now delivers something to the C-suite that is much more than just what they had in the past. It sets a tone for the organisation that if IT as a work stream is able to achieve this, then what other things can the organisational department heads drive into the C-suite so that the external stakeholders of the business can actually feel that you are walking the walk, and I use that as a really good example, because on the one side, on the supply side, suppliers have to do better. They have to be able to do better for their customers. But equally on the client side, the clients need to be walking the walk and talking the talk all at the same time. And it's only when you get those two things in sync do you have a collaborative kind of a arrangement like we have on this call today. You know, you are the most amazing clients who give your time to widen people's knowledge about sustainability themes within IT, but more so it just demonstrates that that we've done our job correctly as a partnership almost. So we're really grateful for that. I'm going to jump into some Q&A if that's okay. Excuse me, Daniel has who's our marketing director. Thank you, Daniel. He's just been collating what's been going on. So what I've got is a question for Inga, which is the recovery of precious metals from IT equipment something you do or will look to offer out to market once the facility has been built, or are they going to be used only internally?
So I'll take this question a number of angles, and then hopefully one of my responses will answer the question. So we, in terms of going out to the market for feedstock, so we are having lots of different conversations with lots of different organizations operating in the e-waste space, and to ensure that we have a commercially viable and, excuse the pun, sustainable flow of e-waste feedstock into the business. And those conversations are ongoing at the moment. In terms of the metals that we are recovering from the facility, there's quite a high demand for them within the Royal Mint at the moment. Certainly demand is outstripping supply at this point in time. So for the foreseeable future, we'll be utilizing the recovered material in-house. In terms of the technology, we've got a really exciting suite of conversations happening to understand how we can scale up the application of this technology beyond our site here in Lantrison. So again, that's a piece of work that we're exploring and trying to understand at the moment. So it is a bit of a watch this space at this point in time. So I hope through those three responses, one of them answered your question.
I think so. I hope so. I've got a question. There's a question that's come in that says, and I think it's for yourself, Dom. Are there ways to address security concerns of secure organisations wanting to make the transition from linearity to circularity within IT? And I'm guessing that leans towards maybe older tech, the perception that older tech is not necessarily as secure from cyber as modern day tech. I don't know if that's something you want to pick on.
Well, we did. I mean, part of our requirements were ensuring kind of modern security was built into the model that we were looking at. And sure, yeah, it's not going to be, you know, fresh out of the box and, you know, cutting edge technology, right? You're going back a couple of years, but pleasingly, like I say, yeah, it met all of our requirements out of the box. So yeah, certainly from, you know, we wouldn't go forward unless that was so, right? There's a minimum requirement you need for ensuring security, and that's obviously a big part of what we do within IT.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, it addresses the pathway that we tread down, which is exploration first, making sure the technology does the job for the organisation, and recognising that not everybody that we speak to, at least, is going to be a customer of ours, because there might be things within the technology that they demand that quite frankly we can't satisfy. But for the majority who are white collar workers like us on the call here, I think it's safe to say that the technology that is presented is fit for the purpose it's being deployed for. I think what also we feel is that organisations now are looking at persona-based procurement as well. So meaning that they won't go and buy the highest spec and then feed the whole staff with that particular model just because 5% need that firepower. They'll look actually at the roles and the job function and then procure against that, so long as that specification meets their requirement, which is a sensible thing to do. So we see clients taking a more not aggressive, that's the wrong word, a more kind of positive approach to procurement. We can't, as an organization, fulfill everybody's IT needs, and we recognize that as a business. But I think it's in exploration with us, it opens at least the mind to an alternative, particularly with regards to resource preservation, which is a big thing. If we're to build back better, people are looking at energy, they're looking at travel, and they're insisting that we get going with those things. But the fact of the matter remains that whatever goes into a laptop, also in terms of the raw components and the rare earth and critical minerals, whatever goes into a laptop pretty much is going to be needed for other parts of industry that are going to be required to build back better. So having a circular economy based business within what is actually quite an easy fix in laptop technology is a really good step for most organizations to help with the transition. I have another question here, actually, if that's okay, which says, unless there's any questions from the team on the call here, is there do any of you have a question that you want to ask? I'll take that as a no. So I was going to say, so you have there's a question actually that's come in from me, which I will answer if that's okay, which is there any downside to procuring remanufactured devices in the volume and availability? So with COVID, we saw a fracture in the supply chain. Technology has a real just-in-time delivery mechanism, and that jolted with COVID, so that various parts of the world had COVID at different times, meaning the supply chain was fractured. And putting that back together was really and still remains a challenge. We operate as a secondary equipment manufacturer, meaning that we can build out in volume. So we have a capacity of currently 10,000 units a month. Our current challenge is maintaining production to levels that customers can draw upon. And then the next challenge is kind of building out a second facility alongside our current facility so we can double up our output without taking all of the commercial risk. As a business, we had the belief, naively probably, that we'll build a factory and they'll all come. We built the factory, they didn't they didn't all come. But that was okay. We built resilience into our business planning. And actually, if we were to turn the clock back and look at ourselves back then, the way we were presenting ourselves in the marketplace to industry was a bit too aggressive. We were kind of hammering down on modern day slavery. We were hammering down on e-waste and what goes on with that with e-waste handling and legislation around that. And rather than look at what our customers were trying to achieve and aligning ourselves with their linguistics, we were just too aggressive. So, and I'm sensing that with WWF and the Royal Mint, Inga, that I don't know, with your science-based targets, that creates almost a contractual rhetoric with other organisations that are looking to engage with you. So it's not just what you're doing internally, it's what your code of conduct might look like to suppliers coming in to work with you. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, it's incredibly timely, Steve, because just this morning I received a notice from my supply chain colleagues with a copy of our revised responsible sourcing statement of intent and accompanying responsible sourcing policy. So we already have a number of activities in play to help us identify and screen and assess our suppliers, but we're now working on what we're calling an enhanced responsible sourcing strategy. So really starting to articulate the minimum expectations we want from our suppliers, but also For our key and strategic suppliers in particular, who have been identified through a number of different commercial and ESG screening criteria, the additional business as usual standards we want them to be performing to, but not just sending them the document and then saying please sign it and tell us you're complying. Actually, it's kind of supplier engagement 101, pulling them into a room, talking them through our expectations, understanding what they're doing already, any challenges they may be facing and how we can support that. But conversely, understanding where they're already delivering best practice. So a really active supplier engagement piece, focusing on these key and strategic suppliers, as I mentioned, identified with ESG criteria at the heart of that screening process.
And how does that reflect on WWF, Lauren?
Yeah, so we do a lot of working with our supply chain. We've embedded the principles of ISO 2400, which is the first sustainable international standard on sustainable procurement. So we're trying to collaborate more with our supply chain to help them to share our knowledge, basically, on we know what's happening on the planet. We've got all these great reports, great resources. How can we help our supply chain to develop with us, rather than just having the standard typical contract for goods and services and saying, oh, that's great, job done. But instead, how can we help embed some clauses within contracts that say, okay, this supplier doesn't score that well on that questionnaire that I mentioned previously. One of the areas that they could improve is perhaps to set an emissions reduction target, or to get renewable energy, or to make sure that their paper is 100% recycled or FSC certified. So small, quick wins that some organizations are on board with achieving. How can we embed those into our contracts? Can we make sure that we help them if they need any access to resources, give them any advice and guidance that we can provide, and pinpoint them in the right direction if we can't dedicate that time to them? We also work with our corporate partners to do the same thing, but on a much bigger scale, and they get a lot more time than our suppliers do as well.
I think what I like about both of those comments is that as sitting client side, I think you appreciate that suppliers don't necessarily have all the answers, but you're willing to help educate them to be part of the bigger picture, rather than just sitting back and expecting people to come in. And I like that open-mindedness about the organisations and yourselves on the call. I don't want to. I'm just having a look here. Okay. I'm going to call a timeout on the call today, if that's okay with everybody, unless there's anything else. I would like to thank you absolutely from the bottom of my heart for supporting us in this call. And for everybody on the call, thank you for your time. If there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You have the email address and so forth, and then we can distribute out to Inga, Dom, or Lauren. I hope you've enjoyed it. Sure. I hope you found it useful. And thank you, everybody, for your time. I really mean that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.